Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine, like, a dance floor, right? Empty at first, then one person starts dancing.
Yeah, maybe a bit awkwardly at first.
Exactly. Then another joins, then a few more, and suddenly, boom, the whole floor is packed, everyone's dancing.
That's the moment, that shift.
That's what we're diving into today, that precise moment when something just clicks. When an idea or a trend or even a behavior hits critical mass and explodes. We're talking about the tipping point.
Mm-hmm. And our guide for this is Malcolm Gladwell's fantastic book, The Tipping Point. Gladwell, he just has this way of looking at everyday social stuff, things we see all the time, but through a completely fresh lens.
He really does. And
Right.
for you, the learner, think of this as your shortcut to understanding how things catch fire, how they go viral.
Which is so relevant today.
Totally. That song that's suddenly everywhere, that weird slang term your cousin uses, that huge online movement. Understanding the tipping point helps make sense of how these things spread so fast, especially now with everything being so connected.
And it's fascinating where Gladwell got his initial spark for this. It was actually from epidemiology.
Like studying diseases.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The spread of infectious diseases. He covered the AIDS epidemic as a journalist, and he saw how viruses could simmer along, low numbers, and then
Yeah.
suddenly hit a point where infections just shoot up exponentially.
Like flattening the curve talk we all heard so much recently.
Precisely.
Yeah.
That curve. The tipping point is that spot where it goes almost vertical, that moment of explosive growth.
So the way viruses spread,
Mm.
that's the model for how ideas spread. What are the key things about how viruses work that he focuses on?
Well, first, epidemics start small, often with just a few individuals, but the key is they're highly contagious.
Right.
Think about that old story, the one with the rice and the chessboard.
Oh, yeah, where you double the grains on each square.
Exactly. One grain, then two, then four. It sounds like nothing at first.
Yeah.
But you get to, like, the 41st square, and suddenly you're over 1 trillion grains.
No.
And by the last square, the 64th, it's something absurd, like 460 billion tons. It just shows that incredible power of doubling, of exponential growth. That's contagion.
It escalates so fast, it's hard to wrap your head around. And viruses don't just sit still, do they? They change.
That's the other key thing. They mutate, they adapt. The flu virus does it every year.
Right. New flu shot season.
Mm-hmm. And we saw it dramatically with COVID-19, new variants popping up. This ability to change and keep going is part of what makes them spread so effectively.
And it's not usually a slow, steady increase. It's that sudden jump, right? Once it hits that tipping point.
Exactly that. It can go from being sort of background noise, low-level infections,
Yeah.
to a full-blown epidemic really quickly once the conditions are just right. That sudden acceleration is the tipping point.
Okay, okay. So we see how that works with diseases. How does Gladwell make the leap to, well, social stuff, ideas, products, trends?
It's a really powerful insight. He argues that the same fundamental rules that govern how a virus spreads can explain how ideas catch on, how products become popular, how behaviors become widespread.
So it's about finding the social equivalent of contagion.
Pretty much. What makes an idea infectious? What pushes it over that edge into mass adoption?
And he boils it down to three main rules, right? His big three.
Yep. The law of the few, the stickiness factor, and the power of context.
All right, let's tackle the first one. The law of the few. This sounds like it's not about everyone pushing an idea, but specific people.
Exactly. Gladwell's point is that a tiny percentage of people often do, like 80% of the work in spreading something. It's not democratic. Certain people, because of their social networks or their personality, have a disproportionate impact.
And he breaks them down into types.
3 types: connectors, mavens, and salesmen.
Connectors. I think I know people like this. They just seem to know everybody.
Totally. They're the social butterflies. They have huge circles of acquaintances, not necessarily deep friendships, but lots and lots of connections across different worlds. These are often called weak ties.
Weak ties. Why are they important?
Well, think about it. Your close friends probably know mostly the same people and information you do. But acquaintances, those weak ties, they connect you to whole different networks, different information flows.
So they bridge gaps.
Exactly. It links back to that 6 degrees of separation idea. Remember that study in the 60s, sending letters across the U.S.?
Vaguely. They found people were connected by just a few steps.
Yeah, like 5 or 6 steps on average. And you see it in fun stuff, too, like the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon game.
Huh. Right. Because he's been in so many different kinds of movies.
He connects different cinematic worlds.
Sure.
Connectors are the real-life Kevin Bacons of social networks. They're hubs.
Okay, so connectors spread things wide. What about mavens? What's their deal?
Mavens are the information gurus. They love gathering knowledge, figuring things out, and then telling people about it. They're the ones you go to when you want a recommendation for, say, a new laptop or the best book to read.
The friend who's always researched everything.
Exactly. But crucially, their motivation isn't persuasion, it's education.
Yeah.
They genuinely want to help you make an informed choice. So their recommendations carry a lot of weight because people trust their expertise. It's not just hype.
Right. They've done the homework. Okay. Connectors, mavens, and salesmen. These sound more like the persuaders.
That's exactly what they are. Salesmen have this incredible, often subconscious ability to persuade. They're charismatic, they build rapport easily, they're the ones who can get you excited about something, make you want to buy in, literally or figuratively.
Like that first person on the dance floor, maybe? The one with infectious energy.
Could be. Salesmen are often masters of nonverbal communication, smiling, nodding, mirroring body language. They connect on an emotional level and make you feel good about agreeing with them.
So you might need all three. Or can one type sometimes do it alone?
It often seems to be a combination. You need the maven to find the cool new thing, the connector to spread the word through different networks, and the salesman to convince people it's actually worth trying or buying.
Makes sense.
Think about the comeback of Hush Puppy shoes in the mid-90s.
Weren't they seen as kind of old-fashioned?
Totally. But then a few super trendy kids in downtown New York started wearing them, maybe ironically at first. Perhaps some fashion mavens spotted this.
Okay.
Then, connectors in those scenes helped spread the look to other groups. And eventually, maybe some influential salesman figures, designers, stylists frame them as cool, vintage, desirable. Suddenly, they went from dusty shells to mainstream fashion.
Wow. From zero to hero, basically. Okay, so the messenger matters a lot. The message itself has to land, right? That brings us to rule number 2.
The stickiness factor.
Yeah.
It's not enough for a message to reach people. It has to actually stick. It needs to be memorable, impactful, something that changes minds or behavior.
Is this like making something catchy?
Sort of. But deeper than just a catchy jingle. It's about the quality of the message itself. Why do some ideas resonate and spread while others just fizzle out? This concept actually inspired another great book, Made to Stick, by Chip and Dan Heath.
Ah, okay. So what makes an idea sticky?
Well, there isn't one single formula, but Gladwell highlights things like simplicity, unexpectedness, concreteness, credibility, emotion, and stories. Think about nostalgia, for example.
Yeah, that's powerful.
It taps into positive memories, existing emotions, often involves stories. Very sticky. But often, stickiness comes down to how the information is structured and presented. You need to package it in a way that grabs attention and is easy to remember and repeat. And crucially, you have to know your audience.
Tailoring the message.
Absolutely. Gladwell uses the example of Sesame Street.
Oh, interesting. How are they sticky?
There were pioneers in using rigorous research to figure out how to actually teach kids through TV. It wasn't just guesswork. Well, initially, some psychologists told them to keep the humans and the Muppets separate on screen. But the Sesame Street creators tested it.
Yeah.
They actually watched kids watching the show, saw what held their attention, what made their eyes wander.
And what did they find?
They found kids were more engaged and learned better when the humans and Muppets interacted. They also figured out how to use repetition, catchy songs, visual cues like numbers and letters appearing on screen, all designed specifically to make the educational content stick in a preschooler's brain.
That's incredible. So much thought went into it. It wasn't just fun puppets.
Not at all. It was carefully crafted stickiness. They knew exactly how to capture and hold that young audience.
Okay, so law of the few gets the message out via the right people. Stickiness factor makes the message memorable and impactful. What's the third piece? The power of context.
Right. This one is about the environment. The idea that behavior is really sensitive to the conditions and circumstances we're in. The same person might act very differently depending on the context.
Like how you act in a library versus at a rock concert.
Exactly. Or how you perceive art in a fancy gallery versus seeing the same piece leaning against a wall at a school fair. The setting changes everything, our behavior, our perceptions.
Gladwell talks about the broken windows theory here, doesn't he? Even though it's kind of controversial now.
He does. And yeah, the theory itself has been debated and challenged a lot in criminology, but the idea behind it illustrates the power of context principle quite well.
Which was?
The basic idea was that visible signs of disorder, like broken windows, graffiti, litter, create an environment that implicitly encourages more disorder, even serious crime, whereas a clean, well-maintained environment sends a signal that bad behavior isn't tolerated.
So the environment itself sends cues about acceptable behavior.
That's the core concept he's highlighting. Think about it personally. Are you more likely to drop litter in a spotless park or a street that's already full of trash? The context influences your choice.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's not just the physical environment, right? It's also the social context, who we're with.
Absolutely. We're constantly adjusting our behavior based on the social situation. Irving Goffman, a sociologist, talked about this as impression management. We have our front stage self for public performance and our backstage self for when we're relaxed and private.
We act differently around our boss than around our best friend.
Precisely. And sometimes, context can have a really profound, even disturbing impact on behavior. The Stanford prison experiment is a classic, albeit ethically fraught, example.
Oh, right. Where they randomly assigned college students to be prisoners or guards?
Yes. In a simulated prison environment in the basement of Stanford University. The experiment had to be shut down after only 6 days because the guards became unexpectedly authoritarian and even abusive, and the prisoners became passive and distressed.
Just because of the roles in the setting.
Largely, yes. It demonstrated how powerfully a situation, a context, can shape and even override individual personality traits. It's like that line from The Truman Show.
Oh, yeah.
Christoph says, "We accept the reality of the world with which we're presented. Context creates that reality."
Wow. That's kind of unsettling, how much context can pull the strings. So we've got the few, stickiness, context. How do these work together in, like, communities or groups?
Well, ideas often spread most easily within groups, where people already share similarities, interests, values, backgrounds. Sociologists call this homophily love of the same.
Like a book club focusing only on sci-fi, an idea related to sci-fi would spread easily there.
Exactly. Gladwell mentions the Yaya Sisterhood books, which initially gained popularity through word-of-mouth recommendations within specific types of women's reading groups.
Ah, niche spread first. But sometimes things break out, right? Like Oprah's book club.
Right. That's a great example of a powerful maven Oprah taking something that might have stayed niche and amplifying it to a massive, diverse audience through the context of her hugely popular show.
And Gladwell talks about a limit to how big effective groups can be.
Yeah, the rule of 150. He discusses the idea, based on anthropological and organizational research, that humans seem to have a cognitive limit to the number of people they can maintain stable social relationships with, roughly 150. Beyond that, groups tend to need more structure or they splinter.
So smaller, tight-knit groups are important for nurturing ideas initially.
They can be. And within those smaller groups, you get things like transactive memory.
Transactive memory, what's that?
It's like a shared memory system. In a close group like a family or team, people implicitly know who knows what, so you don't all have to remember everything.
Like if you're trying to remember that restaurant you went to last year.
Exactly. You might say, oh, ask Sarah. She's the one who remembers all the restaurants. Or Dad knows because he remembered they had amazing ice cream. The group collectively remembers more efficiently than any one person could. It makes a group smarter.
That's cool. So ideas develop in these groups, spread by the few, made sticky, influenced by context. And then there's that adoption curve, right? How trends typically play out.
Mm-hmm. You usually see a pattern. First, you have the innovators, the brave, risk-taking people who try something completely new.
Pioneers.
Then come the early adopters. These are often respected opinion leaders, maybe mavens, who see the potential and jump on board. They're crucial for legitimizing the new thing.
And then comes the tipping point.
Often, yes. After the early adopters, if the conditions are right, the few are working, it's sticky, the context fits, you hit the tipping point, and the early majority and late majority, the mainstream masses, adopt it.
That's when it feels like it's everywhere.
Right. And finally, you get the laggards, the very last people to adopt, often when the trend is already fading.
It's a whole life cycle.
A pretty common one, yeah.
Okay, wow. So pulling this all together for you, the learner, if you want to understand why some things explode and others don't, Gladwell gives us these 3 powerful tools. The law of the few, remembering it's often specific connectors, mavens, and salesmen driving things.
Then the stickiness factor, making sure the idea itself is memorable, engaging, easy to grasp and share. It has to resonate.
And finally, the power of context, recognizing how much the time, the place, the social setting, and the cultural moment influences whether something takes off or not.
And these ideas are, if anything, even more relevant now, aren't they? With social media, influencers who are literally Connectors, mavens, and salesmen rolled into one.
Totally. And the speed at which memes or online challenges spread, it feels like tipping points are happening faster and faster.
Definitely feels that way sometimes. The principles still hold, just maybe accelerated by technology.
So here's a final thought to chew on. Think about a trend you've seen recently. Maybe a fashion thing, a new app, a viral video, anything.
Hmm.
Can you try and map Gladwell's ideas onto it? Who might have been the key connectors, mavens, or salesmen who pushed it forward? What made it sticky? Why did it capture attention? And how did the context, the platform it was on, what else was happening in the world, help it reach its tipping point?
It's a great exercise. Applying that framework really can change how you see trends unfolding around you.
Absolutely. Something to think about.